is The Opinions, a show that brings you a mix of voices from New York Times opinion. You've heard the news. Here's what to make of it.
Would you rather have your hairline 1 inch from your eyebrow or your gums start a centimeter from the bottom of your teeth? My name is Annie Rose Strasser, and I'm the executive producer of Opinion Audio, which means that I listen basically all day to other people's conversations. And I like to think about starting good conversations in my personal life, too. So we are headed into holiday party season, when you have to find something new to talk about with the person you talk to at work every day. Or you have to see family who you haven't seen in a long time, and you're like, oh, God, again. Or the worst, when you have people who don't know each other, who you are the connecting point between, and you have to figure out a way to make all of them talk to each other. All difficult situations that can be solved with a good conversation starter. Conversation starters definitely get a bad rap. I think it's because it sounds like a corny, sort of self-helpy terminology. But in fact, if you break it apart, what we're talking about is like starting a conversation, which is such a meaningful and important thing to do. And I think really good conversation starters give you a lot of connection and understanding of another person and empathy. They're not like sort of board gamey in the way that I think conversation starter sounds. It makes everyone comfortable to be really honest and actually pretty vulnerable, which I think is like what we all should be looking for in our conversation. So I think the thing about a good conversation starter is that it's approachable territory. Like, you don't need to come with any preconceived knowledge to be able to answer the question. Virtually anyone can answer it. It's like an equal playing field for everyone. The ones that are, I think, the most successful is when they just feel fun, but it also like lets you probe. I think the onus is on the person starting the conversation to shepherd the conversation to a more meaningful place from that really approachable wide territory. A couple of years ago, I had to have what I would say was a very awkward dinner between relatives who were meeting for the first time. And I knew that it was going to be really uncomfortable. And so ahead of the dinner, I Googled safe conversation starters. And I found this list from the Greenwich Free Press, 15 safe conversation starters for Thanksgiving dinner tables. It's just like a random list I found on the internet, but they're so good. Would you ever go on reality television? If you had a family motto, what would it be? What was the worst job you ever had? What's one subject that you wish was taught in schools? I memorized all 15. I would say I deployed 7 or 8 over the course of the night. I told no one. We'd be in the middle of a conversation. Something awkward would happen. There would be a lull. And then I would say, so who taught you guys how to ride a bike? And the weirdest thing was absolutely nobody registered it, or I think this maybe was what it was. Everyone was dying for someone to just start some neutral conversation. And so I did, and everyone was grateful that it happened and immediately kind of latched onto it. And I remember what was the worst job you ever had actually was like a really interesting one because everyone told stories about their childhoods and their first jobs, and it turned into a long conversation about the meaning of work. And it didn't lead to disagreement, but it led to meaningful conversation out of like a pretty anodyne conversation starter. When you're talking to people at a party, I feel like there's a few places conversations end up all the time. People like to talk about what they do for work, people they know in common, what television shows you're watching. Conversation that's like slightly impenetrable if you don't share the same turf as the people who are having the conversation. And I think that can be very alienating. It doesn't bring people in. And it's also just predictable. It's boring. I've always been intimidated by impenetrable conversation. I've always been a person who's like, oh, this conversation is above me, or I'm outside of it, or I don't have anything to contribute. And then I kind of step away from the conversation. And I've always liked to find common ground. So whether you feel bored or awkward, or you truly have just run out of things to say to people this holiday season, I highly encourage you to think about using a conversation starter. And to help you out, here are a couple of my favorites. 1, do you believe in aliens?
Yeah. If the universe is so huge, it feels cocky to believe that we're the only ones,
2, if you could have any liquid coming out of your 2 pointer fingers, which liquids would they be and why?
Like coffee. I think the other is seltzer.
High pressure water. All things you could do with high pressure water.
Dr. Pepper and chocolate milk.
I think that's a really good one. By asking it, you start to understand people's priorities and their ways of thinking.
I think one would be like honey, and then the other one would be like acid, you know what I mean? Okay. So you have like the forces of good and evil.
3, would you rather go to the moon or the bottom of the ocean?
There's way too many creepy things happening at the bottom of the ocean. Don't know enough about it. Too many scaries. Not interested.
I find that one to be a very revealing one. I've gotten into big arguments. Why is it important to start these conversations? Well, first of all, it's the holidays. And part of the reason for having a holiday party is to get to know and talk to people you don't otherwise. And it's one of the only times of year we really do that. But also trying to make connections with people in a totally different way challenges your thinking. It makes you as a person a little more conscious of how you answer your questions. And it lets you get to know other people. And I think that's why we're alive. So now you have some good conversation starters. You know why they're worth deploying. And I'd say the next thing to do to memorize your top 5 and go out and use them this holiday season. Be brave. Meet someone new. Have a real conversation.
If you like this show, follow it on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. This show is produced by Derek Arthur, Sophia Alvarez-Boyd, Vishaka Durba, Phoebe Lett, Christina Samuelewski, and Jillian Weinberger. It's edited by Kari Pitkin, Allison Bruzek, and Annie Rose Strasser. Engineering, mixing, and original music by Isaac Jones, Sonia Herrero, Pat McCusker, Carol Saburo, and Afim Shapiro. Additional music by Amin Sahota. The fact-check team is Kate Sinclair, Mary Marge Locker, and Michelle Harris. Audience strategy by Shannon Busta, Christina Samuelewski, and Adrian Rivera. The executive producer of Times Opinion Audio is Annie Rose Strasser.